Horizon Zero Dawn has been widely known as one of the best PlayStation exclusives available, and a major selling point for Sony's home consoles. Originally released in 2017, it was welcomed with rave reviews almost all across the board. Almost 4 years later, does the game successfully withstand the test of time? Or is this an experience that could only fully be enjoyed in the past? Welcome to Rugged Pro Gaming, where I display a real-time interactive representation of my review score, which will increase or decrease in tandem with my verbal pros and cons. As always, we will begin with a perfect 10 and adjust accordingly throughout the review, but enough explaining, let's get right into it.
Well, if you're gonna go sneaking away from home, you'll need to know how to survive in the wild. Come, Aloy. Home now. But starting tomorrow, you will learn to hunt.
It's the year 2020 and we've been living in a world with a pandemic virus, racial injustice, UFOs, hurricanes, and TikTok. Would I be justified to ask myself, is the world coming to an end? In a lot of ways, Horizon's story plays out much like what 2020 is heading towards. You play as a young hunter named Aloy growing up in a world that had seemingly went through hell and back. Unlike 2020, however, Aloy's world wasn't destroyed by social media rage and face masks, but instead was destroyed by the population of huge animal-like machinery. These mechanized inhabitants are one piece of the overarching mystery shrouded within the game's storytelling. Their origin and purpose are unclear, but they undoubtedly have some kind of connection with the protagonist Aloy, who has personal mysteries about her own beginnings as well. Aloy is seen as a motherless freak and was forced to be raised as an outcast for her entire life. As an outcast, the local Nora tribe is forbidden from having any contact with Aloy or her guardian Ross. Forced to live in seclusion without any understanding of why the Nora tribe has outcasted her at birth, or who her biological parents are, Aloy sets out on a mission of personal discovery, determined to gain knowledge of her past. The storytelling is so engaging, largely to its evolving story arc. There are so many questions to be answered and mysteries to be solved that the story naturally maintains its allure. Your search for answers delivers even more questions, and the narrative is crafted so well that the player inevitably shares the same hunt for knowledge as Aloy does. I found myself truly wanting to solve every mystery that the game presents. How was Aloy born? Where did these machines come from? Why was Aloy and her guardian outcasted? The questions continue to stack up and become more and more impactful, not just for Aloy, but for the sake of the world as well. Along the way, you'll meet some interesting characters who all lend a hand in Aloy's adventure in one way or another. Through these interactions with friends and foes alike, you get to see Aloy's character develop from a confused and awkward child to a largely independent and determined young woman.
Yeah, right. This is boring. Time for Boss to get some sleep. You'll be the one surprised tomorrow, outcast. Not me.
Oh, are you gonna shut your mouth? Because that would be a surprise.
Her character is also very emotionally balanced and relatable. She's not overly badass or extremely sensitive, but a perfect mixture of each end of the spectrum. The game also allows you to interact with characters in 3 different emotional responses, including sensitive, logical, and aggressive replies. While these conversational choices don't have much lasting impact on the game world, they still allow you to mold Aloy's personality style in some way, which made me feel closer to her as a whole.
Hey!
The pacing of the story is also very well done for the most part. I'd say that 95% of the story is paced in a way that feels completely seamless and consistent, but where the game slows down a bit is the final stretch. A lot of important insights are crammed into audio files and written data logs. I'm not usually one to read a ton when playing video games, but if the world and story entices me enough, I'll take the extra time to dig into written logs for extra content. My issue with Horizon, however, is that the game is loaded with these written logs in the last few missions of the game. They aren't exactly spread out well, so I found myself reading more than I was playing at the end of the final act. These late game pacing issues remain minor, however, and the story continues to be completely engaging and satisfying in more ways than one, making it one of the better elements to the game. There's no need to play coy here. Horizon Zero Dawn is still one of the best visual experiences you'll find on the PS4, and I honestly don't think there is any room for debate. The world is amazing to look at, from the snowy areas of the Sacred Lands to the lush forests near Meridian. The game consistently delivers visually throughout. The variety of locations keeps your visual palette fresh at all times, and seeing new machines dwell in these locales makes for some surprising events. I remember crossing into a desert area for the first time, having my first experience with the bull-like trampler machines. After finally taking one down, I then had my first experience with glint hawks, who swooped down and immediately began stripping the dead trampler of its resources, as would actual birds of prey do in a real-life setting. These kind of interactive calls and events were presented nicely and further immerses you into the brutality of the world. It's nice to see that outside of their physical construction, the machines really do appear as if they were living, breathing animals interacting to their surrounding as their biological counterparts would. It was fun to play through the game and come across new machines and figure out what kind of animal their design was based off, and those designs were all done with great attention to detail. The machines possess a level of realism to them as they strut through the wilderness or become wide-eyed and alert when they feel your hunting presence nearby. Making this world interesting starts with how the machines are presented, and thankfully Guerrilla Games hit the nail on the head. The presentation of the humans are also on par with what you'd expect from the game, but the consistency with them isn't nearly as perfected as the machines. In certain moments, it just feels like some characters were given more time than others when delivering a realistic representation of facial emotions or voice acting delivery. The good thing is that the far majority of the characters are voiced well and also consistently look alive. But then there are others who seem more robotic than the machines when interacting during dialogue, and some characters are voiced a bit too extreme to come off even remotely believable.
Spirits of the forgotten, souls cursed by the All-Mother, their voices never let me be.
In moments like these, it's easy to be taken aback, and when my 11-year-old son randomly intervenes with a simple, "She sounds weird," I think that says enough.
My walls protect the enemy. We'll have to scale the height. Under fire if we're detected.
Granted, there is only a small handful of these hiccups with certain characters. Aloy specifically sounds and looks amazing throughout the entire ride, along with many others, but that causes the non-achievers to stand out even more. The combat in Horizon Zero Dawn is like nothing you've ever experienced, which in itself deserves a great amount of praise. Have you played games using a bow and arrow against enemies? Of course you have. But have you used that bow and arrow against mechanical animals, picking off their armor and weapons, and then using those weapons against them? It's safe to say that you've never done that. Guerrilla Games created a lane for themselves in terms of creativity of combat, and almost 4 years after its release, there's only a handful of other titles that can even come close. The combat remains fresh due to the differences in approach to each mechanism you face. They take enemy types to a completely new level, requiring precise courses of actions to defeat them. This isn't like different enemy types in most other games, requiring basic changes to defeat them. In Horizon, each enemy has elemental weaknesses and components that can be damaged or removed, opening up areas for critical hits. Without having a premeditated approach to each specific enemy, you'll likely end up dead or wasting more of your resource than needed to be successful. This isn't a game you can just grind and level up in and then power your way through. You can max out Aloy's level and still only do 5 damage to an enemy if you aren't prepared properly. The difference between doing 5 damage and 320 damage is based on the player's knowledge, not their character's level. Understanding where each enemy's weak points are located and experimenting with different elemental arrows, bombs, or traps will lead to much success. Certain locations on an enemy may be vulnerable to fire, while another is vulnerable to shock damage. Or on the same machine, certain spots may be invulnerable to those same elements. So you really have to pick your shots well in terms of accuracy and ammunition. With this in mind, you'll feel like you're in the shoes of an expert hunter trying to engage on your terms for the upper hand. Luckily, you do have an awesome tool called the Focus, which allows Aloy to highlight weak spots on these machines, setting you up to plan your attack effectively. This tool allows you to target enemies so you can track their location and even highlight the path that the machines will travel in order to maintain stealth. Sometimes sticking to the shadows and avoiding engagement is the best option, and your focus tool definitely helps out in your sneakiest moments as well. The only downside to using the focus is your movement slows to a snail pace, causing Aloy to turn her head around extremely slowly. You feel almost frozen, and I really wish at the slightest there was a skill to learn that would allow me to move quicker while using my focus. Even without that kind of skill being available, the 3 skill trees offered in the game does allow players to craft Aloy as they see fit. I wouldn't necessarily call the skill tree deep, but they do offer some great skills such as triple arrows, being able to call for a mount, and silent strike attacks to one-hit most enemies. You're able to get skill points by leveling up Aloy, and outside of a small boost in health, these skill points are the only benefit to the leveling system in the game. I don't have a problem with how the leveling system works, but admittedly I would have liked to see more of a reward for gaining levels, especially since the side activities mainly only give you XP for completing them. There's a ton to do in the world outside of the main storyline. Side quests are abundant and are mostly done in an engaging way, making you want to see them through to completion. There's also errands, which are typically fetch quests, bandit camps that need to be liberated, corruption zones to clear, and some other activities to extend your playthrough. The only issue is, as I mentioned, the rewards for completing these tasks are XP and reward boxes that grant you items that you usually already have. Although they are fun, and I never found myself complaining to see more of the world and kill off more machines, I would have still liked to have been rewarded with special armor, weapons, or customizable pieces of gear. Speaking of that gear, there are tons of weapons and armor options available to buy and trade with merchants throughout the game. Armor has special benefits such as increased stealth, improved handling, and other buffs that fit into most playstyles, while weapons boast certain upgrades such as increased modification slots and the ability to use different types of ammo. These upgraded weapons give you access to attack weak points on certain enemies with the proper ammo type, allowing you to defeat enemies you would have had difficulty with before. Merchants also offer different weapon types that go further than just a bow and arrow. The weapons range from the Rattler, which fires off bolts in rapid succession, to the Tripwire, an elemental trap to topple bigger opponents for easy critical hits. Most games has this kind of variety just for the sake of having variety, but Horizon's weapon and armor catalog is super necessary in order to succeed. Another super necessary mechanic to have is accessible traversal options and being able to climb ledges to gain a height advantage against enemies or just to get to your destination faster. Unfortunately, being able to climb consistently just isn't in Aloy's bag of tricks. Climbing spots are designated typically with yellow paint, which serves to alert the player that you can climb in that location, because otherwise Aloy cannot grab onto other ledges. It's frustrating when you just want to pull yourself up on a ledge while traveling, but can't due to the game's limited climbing mechanic. To Aloy's defense, she is very athletic with her jumping ability. At times you'll be able to bounce up a cliff if you aim a set of jumps properly, but this becomes a hassle more often than not. It's hard to believe someone who possesses her abilities and training cannot execute a simple climb onto a ledge. Outside of the lackluster traversal options and a few other annoyances such as not being able to seamlessly pick up resources without stopping, or human enemies being bullet sponges taking multiple headshots before being put down, the gameplay holds up in a near perfect way. These issues aren't game breaking and don't take away much from the experience, but they are noticeable enough throughout the course of the game, adding sour notes to something that was otherwise remarkably sweet. Horizon Zero Dawn was known as a must-buy for all PS4 owners, but the question we face today was, does it still hold up almost 4 years after its release? If it's not abundantly clear by now, the answer is of course, and being able to purchase the complete edition for under $20 is a complete no-brainer. This game is more deserving of your money right now than some full-price games that have recently been released. If you call yourself a gamer, Horizon Zero Dawn needs to be in your catalog from 2020 and beyond.